In this lesson, we're going to isolate the sharp 11 chord alteration. This is one of my favourite chord colours to add over dominant chords, and I use it all the time in my jazz standard arrangements. First of all, I'll quickly explain the theory, and then I'll show you some examples of how I've used it in my arranging, and then we will drill it around all 12 keys using the whole step 2-5-1 drill. So first of all, let's take a 2-5-1 in C major. So for a 2-5-1 in C major, we would have D minor 9, G13, and C major. Now if we think of the 5 chord, we have this G7. If we think of the Mixolydian mode, to find the sharp 11, we go up to the 4th and then sharpen it. So the 4 is the 11. 1, 2, 3, 4. We cover this in the course on chord extension, so check that out if this is new to you. And when we raise that note by a half step, we get a very interesting colour over the dominant chord. Now on its own this might sound a little peculiar, but here it is in context of the full 2-5-1. And so listen how we have the minor chord, which is starting the progression, and then we have this moment of tension. It's quite a mysterious flavour. We can also add the 9 down here, and that adds a little more colour in there. And it wants to resolve upwards into the 9 of the 1 chord. So that's the progression that we're going to take around all 12 keys. Another variation, which we're going to cover in one of the next lessons in this module, is where we start by playing the 2 chord like this, so root, 7 and 3, and we play and then run up like that. So that's just another way to add some more movement. But for now we will stick to this. Before we drill this around all 12 keys, let me show you a few examples of how I would use this in my playing. So a tune that I cover a lot and that I know is one of our beginner songs, so most students will be familiar with, that's the tune The Nearness of You. If I play the first 8 bars, when we get onto the second line, so that's bar 5, notice what I do with the A minor 7 to D7. Here we go from the top. So what I did there, when I got onto the second line, I rolled down into the A minor, and then I played this. As I mentioned, we're going to come more onto this later, but for now we'd be doing this exercise in the drill, which is picking out the same tones, but we're just starting with a voicing that we're already familiar with, and then to the 1 chord. So that would be a 2-5-1 in G major. But the interesting thing is the application where I used it, it's just a 2-5. So we have A minor 7 to D7, and then that goes to G minor. And then another 3, 6, 2. And then notice on the 5 there, I've added the flat 9, and that's what we covered in the last lesson. So you can see how I now have all these different choices, and this is one of the things that this course will bring you. So that's one example. Another one, let me think, one that actually has the same progression would be the tune Embraceable You, and this happens in bar 3 and 4 where we have an A minor 7 to a D7, so that would go something like this. And so on. And notice in both of those places, if we look at the first song, The Nearness of You, where I'm applying this, there is space in the melody and the space in the harmony. So I have a gap where I have the creative freedom to insert, my own kind of fill or my own ornamentation. And then if we look at the same thing in the tune Embraceable You, we can see that the harmony and the melody is relatively static. So we have a tied note in the melody. And it's exactly these kind of opportunities that we look out for in jazz standards. And then we can call upon these different fills that we have drilled around our whole step exercises. Another example which is very interesting is the tune How High the Moon, and that's because the harmony actually follows a whole step pattern. So if we look at the chords, we have G major, and then that turns minor to go down a whole step to F major, and then that turns minor to go down to E flat major, which is a whole step down. So we have this G major, then G minor, C7, F major, then F minor, B flat 7, E flat major. So we have this descending whole step pattern actually in a jazz standard. And to apply it in that song, I would play something like this. A bit of inner voice movement. And there I'm adding that flat 9 again. So notice I'm choosing when and where I can use these different alterations. So now let's get started with the exercise. We'll start with the 2-5-1 in C major. So we're going to play D minor 7, G7 to C major 7. But we're going to add in this sharp 11 over the 5 chord, resolve it up a whole step into the C major. And then we'll repeat that all the way down. So let's see how this could sound. Notice how I also added the 9 there. So I play D minor 9. My left hand is just playing G7, root 3, flat 7, and then my right hand is playing 9 and sharp 11. And then that top note resolves up a half step, and then we just have the C major voicing. And we could even add some inner voice movement in there, so you can see how you can mix and match these different elements that I'm showing you. But for now, let's just keep it as the D minor 9 or the minor 2 chord going to the 5 chord with 9 and sharp 11, and then resolving into the 1 chord just with the 9 on top. So here's how it sounds. And now let's turn that minor to do a 2-5-1, a whole step down. So notice again I play the 2 chord, I run up, and what I'm thinking in my head here is when I hit that flat 7, or the 7, however you want to look at it, I often think, root 5, flat 3, flat 7, that's my minor chord. So when I hit that 7 or flat 7 of the 2 chords, I'm then going up just a half step, and that will take me to the sharp 11, and this works in any key. So it's about working out these little relationships. Down to our 1 chord. Now let's do the same in B flats, or a 2-5-1 in A flat major. Now a 2-5-1 in G flat major. Now a 2-5-1 in E major. And finally a 2-5-1 in D major. Now you might notice there that I chose to omit the 3 from my left hand, and this is just because I know it's going to sound a bit muddy. I can show you. If I play the 3 down here, I mean it sounds okay, it's just on the cusp, I'd say, of this getting too muddy, to play a voicing like this. But listen, if we play this, it still has that dominant quality, so a lot of it is down to personal taste. And if we did that again, we'd be back to where we started. And you can hear there it is getting a bit low down. So that's half the keys. Let's now do this in the other half. Remember, we start here but go up a half step. So now we have the 2-5-1 in D flat major. So E flat minor 7 or E flat minor 9, however you want to think of this. Run up the arpeggio, and it's off this note we go up a half step, and that will be our sharp 11 of the 5 chord. And actually, if you think about this, the the 5 of the 2 chord becomes the 9 of the 5 chord. So this note is staying down. All that's really changing between the 2 and the 5, we have this voice going up, this voice staying the same, and then of course the flat 7 is falling in my left hand. So instead of this motion here, which we would usually have, this is being replaced by playing this in my left hand. And then to D flat major. Now let's turn that minor and we do a 2-5-1 in B major. Now turn that minor, a 2-5-1 in A major. Now let's do a 2-5-1 in G major. This is the one that we looked at twice in the introduction. Remember, we have those inner voices if we want. The interesting thing as well is we don't have to resolve it. So often when I'm playing jazz standards, I might just play here, Embraceable You. But the idea is we need to be able to isolate and hear that note, and then we can make informed choices on whether we want to resolve it or whether we want to keep it. So back to the exercise. Then let's turn that minor, so 2-5-1 in F now. A little bit slower for you. And the final one would be a 2-5-1 in E flat major. And then we're back to where we started. There are different variations which we're going to look at. A nice one is to play... So there I'm playing a big 10th voicing in my left hand. And I can't play this in all keys, but I can play it often in the white key. So like G, a G7, an F7, a C7. It works in those keys. So a lot of this exercise as well, the whole steps, it will allow you to find which keys you can reach that voicing in. So I can just about catch it in with a G flat 7, but some keys, for example, E flat 7, you know, I will never be able to make that stretch. So it's also a good exercise to understand what your finger stretch is, you know, what kind of range on the keyboard you can get in your left hand voicings, and again, that will open up creative opportunities when we're playing. So I hope you found this lesson useful. If you do have any questions, you can pop them in the comment box below, and we will be exploring more drills with the Sharp 11, which also incorporates upper structure triad. So more on that in the next module. I'll see you in the next lesson.